It's going 97. You're listening to the Cops Off Patrol podcast, the show that brings you real-life conversation for law enforcement, with your host, Clark Edelin.
Hi, and welcome to the Cops Off Patrol podcast. I am Clark Edelin. Today, we're joined by Dr. Bill Worden, who is the medical director for Logan County, as well as the founder of the David Wade Memorial Active Attack Conference. And he is here today to talk to us a little bit more about that and how he got started with it. Doctor, tell me a little bit about the David Wade Conference and what it entails and how you got started with this.
Sure. So this year will be the second annual David Wade Memorial Active Attack Conference. Kind of the way this started was a vision of mine. About a little over 2 years ago now, I was at the Alert Conference in Dallas listening to the various speakers, and I thought, this is something we need to do in Oklahoma, because we had done some active shooter training that was kind of scattered around the state, but we had never brought everyone from different agencies, police, fire, EMS, dispatch, and those things together to do a conference or lectures on specifically active attacks. And then, of course, that conference I was at was about 6 months after David's shooting. And so I thought, what a better way to honor somebody than to have a conference named after them. So that's kind of how this got started. And we're in our second year now, which I think is going to be bigger and better.
So tell me a little bit about the speakers that you're going to have this year and how some of those came about.
Sure. So a lot of the speakers that I try to choose for the conference pertain, of course, to not only active attacks, but that they can relate to police, fire, and EMS. Because one of the main goals of the conference, that's kind of a subtitle, is bringing the red and blue together. So we want cops, firefighters, and dispatchers in the same room learning the same information. And so, our keynote speaker this year is Carly Posey, who had a child die in the Sandy Hook school shooting. And so she works for a foundation now that carries on in the legacy and teaches active attack information, how to protect schools, how to protect businesses. In addition to that, Maureen Will, who was a dispatcher during the Sandy Hook school shooting and is now the director of communications in Newtown, Connecticut, will be providing both a pre-conference session as well as lectures during the session.
So this not only, is for police officers and firefighters, but you even encompass dispatchers into this.
Right. I think it's important that we include dispatchers. I think historically what I've seen in the short time that I've been involved in fire and EMS training is dispatchers are often forgotten. And they're really our first line, and probably more importantly, they're our lifeline. So they need to know what we're doing in the field to be able to understand how they can help us behind the scenes, so to speak. So I think it's important that they hear and learn the exact same information that we're learning to be able to help us do our jobs better.
Awesome. So not only are you an ER doctor, but you are a SWAT team doctor and medical director, but you're also a certified sheriff's deputy. So tell me how all that worked into you starting to get into learning how to train for active attacks.
Sure. So several years ago, and I honestly don't remember now, I was approached by a couple of members of our local SWAT team and said, hey, we need some help on the medical side. You should go to the reserve course. And I'm like, I don't even know what that entails. And so I did that, enjoy working with the SWAT team, helping the guys out, helping them learn the medical aspects. And one of the things I noticed, at least in our communities, is, you hear about all these school shootings, and I didn't feel like that we were prepared to deal with that should it happen. So I approached the sheriff and said, we need to do some active shooter training in our local agencies. And he said, you're right, make that happen. So I started researching various groups that brought that information and taught the courses, found the Alert Institute out of Texas. And as they say, the rest is history. I mean, we've been teaching Alert courses now for almost 3 years. Alert is a co-sponsor of the David Wade Conference. And so I think it's a great partnership to be able to bring the organizations together to teach this stuff locally.
Awesome. And just tell me a little bit more about some of the law enforcement speakers that are going to be at the conference this year.
Sure. So probably one of the the ones that I would highlight that I think is going to be just exceptional is Special Agent Christina Foley, who works at the U.S. Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center. So she'll be providing a 3-hour lecture over protecting America's schools. The Secret Service has analyzed, I think it's 40 plus targeted school attacks over the last 10 years. And so not that it's easy to profile a school shooter, but they have information that helps law enforcement, again, for lack of a better term, profile what a school shooter looks like. And so I think that's going to be exceptional. Another thing that we don't often think about for law enforcement, but that is super important, is law enforcement officers providing medical care. Probably every cop I know carries a tourniquet on their belt. And so one of the speakers is providing a lecture called Tourniquets Outside of the Goldilocks. And what that means is you have this tourniquet and you know how to use it how it's intended, but there are dozens of other ways that you can use that tourniquet to potentially save your life or someone else's life. And so I think that's going to be beneficial for not only the EMS providers, but for the police officers that carry a tourniquet all day long.
Awesome. And I was at your conference last year. Incredible speakers. Learned a lot. Made some new contacts. How did you start finding who you were going to bring to the conference and get them to come?
And so really, I try to choose speakers that I've heard in the past because I want very vibrant, very good speakers that are going to keep the audience engaged. And so the first year, that's really what we did. And we were fortunate the first year that the majority of the speakers volunteered their time to come to Oklahoma to do these lectures. The second, with this being our second year, I reached out to, again, ones that I've heard of and heard them speak, but sometimes there's actually a cost associated with that. And so by last year's registration fees, not having to pay many speakers, we were able to use those fees this year to help pay for bigger, better speakers, so to speak, to come in and help with the conference. And we, of course, hope to keep doing that in years to come.
Do you have any businesses or anybody that helps to sponsor or pay for the conference so that it helps offset some of the costs and bring in some of these speakers other than just the registration costs?
Sure. So, I mean, we've, of course, the first year we did not really have exhibitors because we didn't know how many people were going to attend, didn't know what the outcome was going to be. Well, then the second year here, we've actually sent out exhibitor prospectuses to various exhibitors. So we will have an exhibitor hall that all the attendees can go to. And at this point, we've got a handful of commitments. Of course, the coronavirus slowed things down, but our primary sponsor is going to be Oklahoma ER and Hospital, and then North American Rescue, and then the Alert Institute out of Texas. So those will be three of our kind of key sponsors that are helping with the conference.
Awesome. And this is coming up in July.
Correct. Yeah, the pre-conference is July 21st, and then the actual two-day conference is the 22nd and 23rd.
So if somebody wants to register for this, how would they go about doing that?
Sure. So they can go to our conference website, which is www.dwmaac.org, which is David Wade Memorial Active Attack Conference.org. And that website, of course, will host registration. It lists speaker bios, the agenda. And so if anybody wants more information, they can certainly get that there.
So the conference is named after Deputy David Wade. Give us just a little bit of an overview of why it's named after him and how you were involved that day.
So David was shot in the line of duty in April of 2017. And I was involved in his care during that day. And of course, as everybody knows, that was a very tragic day for everyone involved. And so one of the speakers that was at the conference, which actually kind of sparked my interest in doing this, he made the comment that we all die twice. The first time we die is when our heart stops beating. And the second time we die is when people stop speaking our name. And so I think that the conference helps us remember David. And so by keeping his name in the forefront, it keeps his memory alive, and it helps teach all of us, which I know is one of the things that David was very involved in, was education. And so I think that this conference is really something, I mean, to use the family's words, this conference is something that he would have attended. And so I think that helps carry on his memory and keeps his name alive.
Yeah. Rough day. I remember it just as well as you do. So I'm glad that you're doing what you can to keep David's name out there and not let him get forgotten. So
Yep.
We're starting to see a new trend where suspects are, if they barricade or whatever, will try to burn the structure down that they're in, whether to commit suicide or to keep law enforcement back. Talk a little bit about that and how it's going to be involved in the conference.
Sure. So one of our kind of key firefighter instructors, which also will certainly involve law enforcement, is Fire Chief Adrian Shepard from the San Francisco Bay Area. He's going to talk about fire as a weapon. He actually did his thesis in graduate school on the topic of fire as a weapon. And unfortunately, when we talk about active attacks, that's one reason this is not called an active shooter conference, because perpetrators of these crimes don't necessarily have to have a gun to be an active attacker. And as you mentioned, we see more often that they're using fire as a weapon. And traditional SWAT teams and law enforcement officers don't really know how to deal with that. And the fire departments, of course, don't want to go until the area is secure. And so I think that this 3-hour lecture will provide valuable information to both law enforcement and firefighters to be able to work side by side when somebody chooses to use that as a weapon.
Awesome. Great stuff. Looking forward to it again this year. Like I said, last year, incredible speakers, and knowing you, I know it can only get bigger and better from here. So look forward to it. And thank you for joining us today. Once again, tell us one more time how people can go register for this.
Sure. If they go to our website, which is www.dwmaac.org, and that's David Wade Memorial Active Attack Conference.org.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Dr. Worden, we thank you for coming on with us today and look forward to seeing you in July.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. Join us next week. We'll bring you some more in-depth conversation for law enforcement. Stay safe and watch your six.